It was a cold and quiet evening in the city. The streets were almost empty, and the streetlights flickered faintly against the gray sky. People were hurrying home carrying groceries, holding hands, or rushing to escape the chill. But there was one small figure that moved slowly, almost invisible among the shadows. A boy, no older than 12, walked along the sidewalk with his thin jacket tightly wrapped around him. His shoes were worn out, full of holes, and his socks were wet from the puddles on the street. He carried nothing but a small, tattered backpack, and his eyes, though alert, were filled with fear and sadness. The boy had been living on the streets for months. He had no home, no family to turn to, and no one who cared about him. Every day was a struggle. Finding food, keeping warm, and avoiding trouble were all he could think about. Sometimes he would hide in alleyways. Other times he would sleep on park benches, always alert, always waiting for someone to notice him. But most people didn't notice him. Most people walked by without a glance, lost in their own world. On that evening, he wandered near a small neighborhood church. It was an old building with white walls that were beginning to peel, but the light from inside shone warmly onto the street. Music floated softly through the open doors, and laughter and chatter could be heard. Inside, people were gathering for their evening service, singing hymns and sharing stories. But outside, on the steps of the church, the boy felt invisible, as if he didn't belong anywhere. A man stepped out of the church wearing a long black robe that marked him as a pastor. He was in his late 40s with kind eyes and a gentle face. He noticed the boy immediately. There was something about him, the way he moved, the way his eyes darted around nervously, that tugged at the man's heart. The pastor had spent years helping people in his community. He knew suffering. He had seen it every day. But there was something about this boy that made him stop and pay attention. "Hey there, young man," the pastor called softly, approaching the boy carefully so he wouldn't startle him. The boy froze, his body tense. He had learned to trust no one, to stay quiet and avoid trouble. He looked up at the pastor warily, suspicion in his eyes. I don't need anything," the boy muttered, trying to walk past him. The pastor smiled gently. "I can see that you're trying to be brave out here. But sometimes even the brave need help. How about a warm drink and some food?" "Nothing fancy. Just a warm drink," the boy hesitated. He had heard promises before, promises that were never kept. People often gave him a handout, then walked away, leaving him feeling small and forgotten. But something about the pastor's voice, soft and patient, made him stop. Slowly, almost reluctantly, he nodded. "All right," he said quietly. "Just the food." The pastor extended his hand. "Come with me." The boy followed, keeping a little distance, still unsure if he could trust this stranger. As they walked into the church, the warmth hit him first. It was more than just the heat. It was the feeling of being somewhere safe, somewhere that welcomed him. The smell of freshly baked bread and coffee filled the air. The sound of quiet laughter and soft music made him feel normal, something he hadn't felt in a long time. The pastor led him to a small table near the back of the church and set down a plate with hot food and a cup of warm cocoa. The boy stared at it, unsure if it was real. Hunger had been his constant companion for so long that the sight of food almost made him dizzy. "Go ahead," the pastor encouraged. "Eat. You don't have to be polite. Just eat." The boy hesitated, then slowly picked up the fork. The food was warm, and the taste reminded him of something he could barely remember: comfort, care, normal life. As he ate, the pastor watched quietly, giving him space but staying close enough to offer reassurance. After a few minutes, the boy spoke. Why are you helping me?" His voice was small, almost broken. The pastor smiled softly. "Because someone helped me when I was younger. And because everyone deserves a chance no matter what's happened in their life." The boy didn't respond immediately. He wanted to, but words felt strange after so much silence. He had never felt anyone care about him like this. The pastor seemed different from the others. There was no judgment in his eyes, no rush to get him out the door, no questions about why he was on the street. Just kindness. After finishing his meal, the boy shifted uncomfortably. "I can't stay long. People will notice." "That's okay," the pastor said. "You don't have to stay forever. Just for now. You can come as you need, as long as you need." The boy felt a flicker of hope, something he hadn't felt in months. Maybe someone really did care. Maybe he didn't have to face the streets alone every night. Over the next few weeks, the pastor made it his mission to help the boy. He brought him clothes, blankets, and books. He offered tutoring and guidance, teaching him how to read better and helping him with basic schoolwork. The boy was shy and cautious at first, but slowly he began to open up. He started to smile, a rare and fragile thing at first, but real. The pastor also helped the boy understand trust. He explained that trust didn't mean everything would be perfect, but it meant having someone who would stand by him no matter what. And slowly the boy started to believe it. He began to see the pastor not just as a helper, but as someone who genuinely cared about him, someone he could count on. One evening, after a particularly long day, the boy sat on the church steps with the pastor. The sky was turning pink as the sun set, and a cool breeze blew through the street. The boy looked up at the pastor and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." The pastor placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to thank me. You're doing all the hard work. I'm just here to help you along the way." For the first time in a long time, the boy felt something he had almost forgotten: hope. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew he wouldn't have to face it alone. He had someone who believed in him, someone who would guide him through the storm. That night, as the boy lay on a cot in the small room the pastor had prepared for him, he thought about his life. The streets, the hunger, the fear. They were still there in his memory, but they didn't feel as heavy anymore. There was a light now, a small flame of hope that someone had started inside him, and for the first time in a long time he allowed himself to dream. He dreamed of a life where he wasn't invisible, where he had friends, where he could laugh without fear, and deep down he knew that no matter how hard the road ahead would be, he had someone who would walk it with him. The pastor, sitting in his small office across the hall, looked out the window at the boy. He had helped many people before, but there was something different about this boy. There was a spark in him, a potential that just needed care and attention, and the pastor knew with quiet certainty that this boy's life would not end on the streets. It was the beginning of a journey, one that neither of them could fully see yet. A journey of growth, trust, and transformation, and it all started with a simple act of kindness, a warm meal, a gentle word, and the belief that every child, no matter how lost, deserved a chance. The next morning, the boy woke up to the soft light streaming through the small window of the room the pastor had prepared for him. For the first time in a long while, he felt warmth, not just from the blankets, but from the comfort of being somewhere safe. He sat up slowly, stretching his stiff limbs, and looked around. Everything was simple: a small bed, a few shelves with books, and a chair in the corner. But to him it felt like a palace. It felt like someone cared enough to make a place just for him. Downstairs he could hear the sounds of the pastor preparing breakfast. The smell of eggs and toast filled the air. The boy hesitated for a moment before stepping out of the room. His stomach rumbled, and he realized just how hungry he had been the night before. He wasn't used to being fed regularly, and the thought of eating in peace without fear of being interrupted or chased away felt almost strange. "Good morning," the pastor greeted him warmly. "Did you sleep well?" The boy nodded, still shy. I think so." "Good," the pastor said. "Eat first, and then we'll see what the day brings." As the boy sat down to eat, he noticed a plate placed beside his meal with simple things: a toothbrush, a comb, and clean clothes neatly folded. The pastor had thought of everything. He handed him the items with a smile. "You can clean up, and then we can start with a little schoolwork. Nothing too hard, just a start." The boy felt a mix of embarrassment and relief. He hadn't had a real bath in days, and wearing clean clothes made him feel different. Lighter, almost as if he were shedding the weight of the streets. He went to the small bathroom and washed carefully, taking his time. It was a small ritual, but it made him feel human again. He could see himself in the mirror, and for the first time he saw more than just a scared, hungry boy. He saw someone who could belong somewhere. After breakfast, the pastor brought out some books and notebooks. "Let's see where we can start," he said gently. "Don't worry if you don't know something. We'll learn together." The boy picked up a pencil nervously. Learning hadn't come easily to him. School had been a challenge before he became homeless, and now, after months on the streets, it felt even harder. But the pastor didn't rush him. He explained things slowly, repeating words and letters patiently. When the boy struggled, the pastor smiled and encouraged him instead of showing frustration. Hours passed like this. The boy worked hard, sometimes making mistakes, sometimes asking questions hesitantly. And the pastor guided him every step of the way. Slowly, the boy began to feel proud of his progress. For the first time, he realized that he could learn. that he could understand, and that he was capable of more than surviving day to day. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. The pastor continued to care for the boy, providing not just food and shelter, but guidance, love, and attention. He introduced the boy to the church community, where people offered small acts of kindness, donating clothes, books, or just sharing a smile. At first, the boy was hesitant. He wasn't used to people being genuinely kind, and he often feared that kindness would come with strings attached. But he slowly learned to trust, piece by piece. One chilly afternoon, the pastor took the boy on a small walk outside the neighborhood. They didn't go far, just to a nearby park where children were playing and the air was filled with laughter. The boy watched quietly from a distance, unsure if he should join in. The pastor knelt beside him. "You can play if you want," he said softly. "You deserve to feel joy too." The boy looked at him hesitant. I don't know how," he whispered. "Then I'll teach you," the pastor replied. "Sometimes, we just need someone to show us the way." Slowly, carefully, the boy joined the other children. At first he stumbled and felt awkward, but the pastor's eyes were always there, encouraging him. By the end of the afternoon, the boy had laughed for the first time in months. It was a quiet, shy laugh at first, but real. And in that moment, he began to understand that life could be more than just surviving. Back at the church, the pastor continued teaching the boy about life, responsibility, and kindness. He told stories of people who had faced hardships but had found their way through perseverance and support. He spoke not in a way to lecture, but to inspire, planting seeds of hope in the boy's heart. One day, the boy asked a question he had never dared to ask before. "Pastor, do you really think I can have a life like other kids?" His voice trembled slightly, as if even asking the question was risky. The pastor looked at him with unwavering eyes. "I don't just think it, I know it. You are stronger than you realize. You've survived things that would break many people, and that strength is something no one can take from you. With guidance, work, and faith in yourself, you can achieve anything you want." The boy absorbed the words quietly. He wanted to believe them, but he had spent so long feeling worthless that it was hard to imagine. Yet something in the pastor's voice, something in his steady presence made him hope. Maybe, just maybe, it was true. Months went by and the boy grew healthier, stronger, and more confident. He began attending school regularly, catching up on lessons he had missed and forming small friendships. He still struggled sometimes, but the pastor was always there, to guide him, to remind him that mistakes were part of learning and failure was not the end. One rainy evening, the boy came to the pastor, soaked to the bone. His expression was troubled. "Pastor, I got into a fight at school today. Some kids were teasing me about, my past." His voice shook. The pastor placed a hand on his shoulder. "I know it's hard. People can be cruel when they don't understand. But remember, your past doesn't define you. Your actions do. You're learning, growing, and becoming someone better every day. Don't let their words take away your progress." The boy nodded slowly, wiping his eyes. "I'll try," he whispered, and he did try. Slowly, the boy began to transform, not just in appearance, but in spirit. He learned to stand tall, to speak confidently, and to face challenges with courage. He still had moments of doubt, fear, and sadness, but the pastor's constant support became a safety net he could rely on. The church community also played a role. Members of the congregation offered encouragement, small gifts, and words of kindness. They cheered his achievements no matter how small, and helped him feel like he was part of something bigger. The boy began to understand the meaning of community, of belonging, and of love that was freely given. One evening, after a long day, at school and tutoring, the boy sat with the pastor on the church steps. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, and the city seemed calm after a busy day. The boy looked at the pastor and smiled shyly. I think I'm starting to feel happy," he said quietly. The pastor smiled warmly. "That's wonderful. Happiness isn't about having everything. It's about appreciating what we have, working toward what we want, and knowing that someone cares. And remember, you've earned this happiness through your hard work and courage. The boy felt a warmth in his chest, a mixture of pride and gratitude. He had come so far from the scared, hungry boy wandering the streets. He had found safety, guidance, and hope. And he had discovered that even after the darkest times, there could be light. As the days passed, the boy and the pastor continued to build their bond. The boy learned about responsibility, respect, and compassion. The pastor taught him life skills, how to manage his time, set goals, and face challenges without fear. The boy also learned to give back in small ways, helping around the church, assisting other children who needed guidance, and sharing his story quietly with those who would listen. One quiet night, the boy lay in his small room reflecting on his journey. He thought about the streets, the loneliness, and the fear he had endured. He thought about the meals, the lessons, and the kindness he had received. And most of all, he thought about the pastor who had seen something in him that no one else had. The boy realized that life had given him a second chance, and he was determined to make the most of it. For the first time in a long while, he slept peacefully, knowing that he was not alone, that he had someone who believed in him, and that he had a chance to build a future that was once unimaginable. And that night, a seed of hope and determination was planted. A seed that would grow with time, shaping the boy into someone who could one day give back, just as he had been given a second chance. Years had passed since the boy first found shelter and guidance at the small church. The once scared child had grown taller, stronger, and more confident. His clothes were no longer tattered, his shoes were sturdy, and his face, once drawn with fear and hunger, now carried a quiet strength. Life had not been easy, but with the pastor's guidance, he had begun to understand the meaning of hope, perseverance, and faith in himself. School had become a place of learning and growth. The boy, now a teenager, was no longer the quiet, fearful child who had wandered the streets. He had started to make friends, though cautiously, and his teachers noticed his dedication and determination. Though he was still shy at times, he began to participate more in class, answer questions, and even help other students who struggled. Yet life continued to test him. There were moments when the past felt too close, when memories of sleeping on cold streets or going hungry returned like shadows. Sometimes other kids at school would tease him, unaware of his past struggles. They didn't know the nights he had cried alone, the hunger he had endured, or the fear he had carried. But the boy had learned resilience. He had learned that his past did not define him, and that the strength he had gained could help him face challenges with courage. The pastor remained a constant presence in his life. Even as the boy grew older, he still visited the church regularly. The pastor offered guidance, not just in schoolwork, but in life lessons. Lessons about honesty, kindness, responsibility, and respect. He taught the boy how to manage money, set goals, and think about the future. He emphasized the importance of giving back, of helping those who were struggling as he once had. One afternoon, after finishing his homework, the boy sat with the pastor on the steps outside the church. The sun was low, casting a warm glow across the neighborhood. "Pastor," he said hesitantly, "do you really think I can make something of myself? That I can be someone important?" The pastor looked at him with steady eyes. "You already are someone important," he replied. "It doesn't matter how big or small the world thinks you are. What matters is that you live your life with purpose, kindness, and courage. You've survived things that would have broken many people. That shows your strength. That shows who you are." The boy nodded, absorbing the words. He wanted to believe them completely, but sometimes doubts crept in. He worried about the future, about making mistakes, and about whether he could truly escape the shadow of his past. But he also knew that the pastor's faith in him was unwavering, and that gave him courage. As the years passed, the boy continued to grow, not just physically, but emotionally. He developed interests and talents. He discovered a love for reading, often spending hours in the church library, losing himself in stories of heroes, adventures, and people who overcame hardships. He also became interested in helping others. He would assist younger kids at the church, teach them to read, or share small acts of kindness. It was his way of giving back, inspired by the pastor's teachings. School became a source of pride. The boy worked hard, often staying late to complete assignments or study for exams. He knew that education was a way out, a chance to build a life that was once unimaginable. His hard work paid off. He began receiving recognition from teachers and peers, and even small awards for his dedication and effort. Each achievement, no matter how minor, strengthened his belief in himself and in the possibility of a brighter future. Despite his successes, life was not without challenges. Teenagers at school could be cruel, and sometimes he faced bullying or judgment for his background. There were moments when he felt overwhelmed, when the weight of expectations and memories pressed heavily on him. On such days, he would visit the pastor seeking advice, comfort, or simply a listening ear. And the pastor, as always, offered wisdom without judgment, encouragement without pressure. One rainy evening, the boy, now a young man, arrived at the church soaked from head to toe. He had had a difficult day at school. Some students had teased him cruelly, mocking his past and questioning his abilities. He had tried to ignore them, but their words had cut deep. He found the pastor waiting as if he had known he would come. The pastor handed him a warm towel and a cup of cocoa. "Talk to me," he said gently. The young man sighed, letting his emotions spill out. "They don't understand. They don't know what it's like to have nothing. They don't know what it's like to be scared all the time. I try, Pastor, I really try. But sometimes it feels like it's never enough." The pastor listened quietly, then spoke softly. "It's never easy to face people who don't understand your journey. But remember this, you've already overcome what they could never imagine. Their words cannot erase your strength, your growth, or your achievements. You are building a life based on your courage, not their opinions. Keep moving forward and let your actions speak louder than their words." The young man nodded, taking comfort in the pastor's words. He realized that life's challenges were not obstacles meant to stop him, but tests of his resilience and determination. Each difficulty he faced made him stronger, more capable, and more prepared for the future. With the pastor's guidance, the young man also began to think seriously about his future. He dreamed of finishing school, finding a stable career, and one day being able to help others the way he had been helped. He wanted to prove not just to himself but to the world that the past did not define him, that he could rise above hardship and make a meaningful life. The pastor encouraged him to explore his interests and talents, to pursue education diligently, and to plan for the future carefully. He also emphasized the importance of character, honesty, empathy, and humility. The young man listened attentively, internalizing each lesson and slowly building a vision for his life. Despite the focus on the future, he never forgot the past. The streets, the fear, the loneliness, they were still part of his memory, and he carried them quietly as reminders of what he had endured and what he had overcome. But instead of causing despair, these memories now fueled determination. He wanted to succeed not just for himself, but for the pastor, for the church, and for every child who might be walking the streets alone. During this time, the young man also formed friendships that were meaningful and supportive. Unlike the fleeting acquaintances of his earlier years, these friends respected him, encouraged him, and shared in his dreams. They became a small family, providing companionship, laughter, and support. Through these connections, he learned the value of trust, loyalty, and shared growth. One evening, as he and the pastor sat together watching the sunset, the young man spoke quietly. "Pastor, I sometimes think about the life I could have had if you hadn't helped me. I don't even want to imagine it. You saved me in ways I can't even explain." The pastor smiled warmly. "I didn't save you alone. You saved yourself too. You chose to trust, to work hard, to keep going even when it was difficult. I only guided you. You did the real work." The young man nodded, understanding the truth in the words. He realized that while the pastor's guidance had been crucial, his own choices, determination, and resilience had shaped his life, and that realization filled him with pride and gratitude. As he approached the end of high school, the young man faced decisions about college, career paths, and his future. The weight of responsibility felt heavy, but the lessons of perseverance, faith, and guidance he had learned from the pastor gave him confidence. He knew that whatever path he chose, he had the tools, the strength, and the wisdom to succeed. One particularly proud moment came when he received his high school diploma. The pastor was there, beaming with pride as the young man walked across the stage. It was not just a piece of paper. It was a symbol of triumph over adversity, proof that determination, guidance, and kindness could change a life. After the ceremony, the young man and the pastor sat together quietly. "I did it," he said softly. "I really did it." "You did," the pastor replied, placing a hand on his shoulder. "And this is only the beginning. Remember, success is not just about what you achieve for yourself, but what you do to help others along the way. Your journey is just starting, and there will be many more challenges and opportunities ahead." The young man looked at the pastor, feeling a mix of gratitude, respect, and determination. He had come a long way from the scared boy wandering the streets. He had grown into a young man with dreams, purpose, and the ability to make a difference. And he knew that one day he wanted to repay the kindness that had changed his life forever. As they walked back to the small church that had become his home, the young man felt a sense of peace. The future was uncertain, but he was ready. He had strength, knowledge, and a mentor who believed in him. Most importantly, he had hope, a hope that would guide him through whatever lay ahead. After finishing high school, the young man stepped into a new chapter of his life. He had worked hard for years, guided by the pastor's wisdom and support, and now he was ready to face the world beyond the small neighborhood church. He felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Leaving behind the familiar streets and the sanctuary of the church was not easy. But he knew that opportunities awaited, and he was determined to make the most of them. He enrolled in college, a place filled with possibilities and challenges. The first days were overwhelming. The campus was large, with thousands of students rushing between classes, buildings towering high, and professors expecting knowledge he had only recently begun to learn. At first, he felt out of place. He remembered the streets, the alleys, the nights he had spent hungry and alone, and for a moment self-doubt crept in. But he reminded himself of the lessons he had learned at the church. He had survived worse, and he had strength. He focused on studying diligently, taking notes in every class, asking questions, and staying late in the library to make sure he understood everything. It was not easy. There were long nights of exhaustion, moments of frustration, and days when he doubted if he could keep up. But each time he felt discouraged, he thought of the pastor, the man who had never given up on him, who had believed in him even when he could not believe in himself. That thought gave him courage. He also worked part-time to support himself. He cleaned offices, stocked shelves, and sometimes delivered packages. The work was tiring, but it reminded him of the value of hard work and perseverance. Money was tight, and he often had to budget carefully, but he never complained. He remembered what it was like to have nothing, and every dollar he earned was a step toward independence. College life was also about people. The young man was shy at first, unsure how to connect with others who had grown up very differently. Some classmates were kind, others indifferent, and a few were judgmental, but he found friends who respected him for his honesty, diligence, and integrity. They encouraged him, shared laughter, and became a support system as he navigated the challenges of higher education. Slowly, he learned to trust again, forming connections that were meaningful and lasting. As he studied, he also began to think about his future. He dreamed not just of financial stability, but of making a difference. He wanted to help children like he once was, to give hope to those who had none. He knew that his journey had been shaped by one act of kindness, and he felt a deep desire to pay it forward. Every lecture he attended, every assignment he completed, and every hour he worked was a step closer to achieving that goal. Time passed quickly. Years of hard work, dedication, and focus began to pay off. The young man started excelling in his field. Professors praised his determination and intelligence, and his peers recognized his reliability and kindness. He had learned to combine his ambition with empathy, understanding that true success was not just personal achievement, but the ability to uplift others along the way. Even with his achievements, he never forgot the pastor. Every week he would call or visit the church, sharing stories about his progress and seeking advice. The pastor was always there, offering guidance, celebrating victories, and reminding him to remain humble and grounded. Their bond had grown stronger over the years, built on trust, gratitude, and mutual respect. One weekend, after completing a particularly challenging semester, the young man returned to the church for a longer visit. He wanted to spend time with the pastor, to reflect on how far he had come and to plan for the future. They sat together in the quiet church hall, sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows, and talked for hours. "I sometimes can't believe how far I've come," the young man said quietly. "There were moments when I thought I'd never make it, moments when I felt so small and worthless. But you always believed in me. You showed me that there was more to life than survival." The pastor smiled, his eyes reflecting pride and humility. "You found the strength inside yourself. I only showed you the way. Remember, life is about choices, effort, and persistence. You chose to keep going, and that choice has shaped the person you are today." The young man nodded, feeling a swell of gratitude. "I want to do something meaningful. I want to help children who are like I was, to give them hope, opportunities, and a chance to succeed. That's a noble goal," the pastor said, "and I know you can do it. But remember, it takes planning, patience, and careful steps. Make sure your foundation is strong first so you can help others without falling yourself." The young man listened carefully, taking every word to heart. He realized that true giving was not just about generosity, but about preparation, wisdom, and responsibility. He began to make plans for the future, saving money, learning skills, and preparing himself to help in ways that would make a real difference. As graduation approached, the young man felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. He was about to step fully into adulthood, ready to face the world on his own terms. But he also knew that his journey was not just about personal success. He carried with him the lessons of the pastor, the memories of his past struggles, and the desire to give back. On the day of his college graduation, the young man walked across the stage, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment. He had come from nothing, and now he had a degree, skills, and the confidence to pursue his dreams. As he held the diploma in his hands, he thought of the pastor, the church, and every moment that had shaped him. He knew that this achievement was not just his own, but a reflection of the guidance, support, and faith he had received over the years. After the ceremony, he returned to the church, eager to share his success with the pastor. The pastor welcomed him with open arms, pride shining in his eyes. "You've done well," he said simply. "I always knew you would." "I couldn't have done it without you," the young man replied, his voice thick with emotion. "You gave me hope, guidance, and a chance to believe in myself. I want to repay you someday, to make a difference like you made in my life." The pastor shook his head gently. "You don't owe me anything. I helped because it was the right thing to do, but I know that with your heart you will find ways to help others. That is repayment enough." The young man smiled, feeling a deep sense of purpose. He knew that one day he would have the opportunity to give back in a meaningful way, not just to the pastor, but to others who needed guidance, care, and hope. He wanted to create opportunities, provide shelter, and show kindness to those who felt lost, just as he had once felt. In the months that followed, he focused on building a stable life. He found a job that allowed him to grow professionally and support himself. He continued to save money, always thinking ahead to the day when he could help others. Every decision he made, every effort he put forth, was guided by the lessons of perseverance, gratitude, and compassion that the pastor had instilled in him. Yet, no matter how busy he became, he never forgot the pastor. Every week he made time to visit the church, share his experiences, and seek advice. Their conversations remained a source of wisdom and comfort, reminding him of the importance of staying grounded, humble, and true to his values. Through all the hard work, long hours, and challenges, one thought remained constant in the young man's mind: the desire to repay the kindness that had changed his life. He often imagined the day he could return to the pastor, not just with words of gratitude, but with actions that would make a lasting difference. That day felt far off at times, but he knew it would come, and he was determined to be ready. The young man's journey had been long, filled with struggles, victories, and growth. From the scared, hungry boy who wandered the streets, he had become a capable, confident, and compassionate young adult. Every step of the way, he had learned lessons that shaped not just his skills, but his character. He had learned the value of hard work, the power of hope, and the importance of kindness. As he looked ahead to the future, he felt ready. Ready to face challenges, pursue his dreams, and most importantly, to make a difference. The lessons of the past, the guidance of the pastor, and his own perseverance had prepared him for the next chapter, a chapter where he could truly repay the kindness that had saved him and where he could give hope to those who needed it most. And in that preparation he found peace. He knew that the journey would not always be easy, that there would be obstacles and setbacks, but he also knew that he was stronger, wiser, and more capable than ever before. With the pastor's teachings in his heart, the memories of his past struggles, and a determination to help others, the young man stepped confidently into the world, ready to write the next part of his story. Years had passed since the young man had left the church to pursue his education and career. Every step he had taken, every challenge he had faced, and every victory he had achieved had been shaped by the lessons and guidance of the pastor who had once saved him from the streets. Now he had reached a point in his life where he was successful, stable, and ready to give back in a way that would honor the man who had changed everything for him. He packed his car one bright morning and began the familiar drive to the neighborhood where the small church stood. The streets were lined with trees, the same trees he had seen as a boy walking timidly along the sidewalks, unsure of what the future would bring. Everything felt familiar yet different. He remembered the cold nights, the hunger, and the fear, but now there was no fear in him, only gratitude, determination, and a deep sense of purpose. As he approached the church, he saw the pastor standing outside, watering the small garden near the entrance. The pastor had grown older. His hair touched with gray, but his posture was still strong, and his eyes still carried the warmth and kindness that had always guided the young man. The young man felt a wave of emotion, a mixture of joy, respect, and gratitude as he stepped out of the car. "Pastor," he called softly. The pastor turned, his face lighting up in recognition. "You're back," he exclaimed, setting down the watering can. "It's been too long." The young man smiled, though his eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Yes, it's been a long time, but I've never forgotten everything you did for me." They embraced briefly, a hug filled with years of shared experiences, struggles, and victories. It was a simple gesture, yet it carried immense weight. Words could never fully express the gratitude, love, and respect that the young man felt for the pastor. They stepped inside the church and sat in the quiet hall. The pastor looked around as if noticing the familiar space with fresh eyes. "You've done well," he said simply. "I've heard about your achievements. I'm proud of you." The young man shook his head. "I didn't do it alone. You guided me, taught me, and believed in me when no one else would. I want to repay that, Pastor. I want to help the church, the community, and children like I once was. I want to create opportunities for them, just like you created one for me." The pastor listened, his expression thoughtful. "Your heart is in the right place. But remember, true help comes from careful planning, dedication, and understanding. It's not about doing something once. It's about creating lasting change." The young man nodded. "I understand. That's why I've prepared. I've saved money, I've learned skills, and I've built a network that can support this. I want to start a program for homeless children, offering food, education, and shelter. I want them to feel hope, safety, and care, just like I did." The pastor's eyes glistened with pride. "You've come full circle. I'm honored, truly. And I know you will make a difference. But let's start slowly, plan carefully, and ensure that this help reaches as many children as possible." Together, they walked through the church, inspecting spaces that could be converted into classrooms, dormitories, and activity areas. The young man had thought of everything: beds, desks, books, meals, and even extracurricular activities that could nurture the children's talents and confidence. He spoke with passion and determination, describing his vision in detail. The pastor listened, nodding, occasionally offering guidance based on his years of experience helping the community. As they sat down to discuss plans over tea, the young man shared his idea of a mentorship program. "I want to involve volunteers, teachers, and mentors. Children need guidance, someone to believe in them, just like you believed in me. They need to know that their past doesn't define their future." The pastor smiled warmly. "That is exactly what they need. And you, my boy, have the right heart and experience to lead this. You know firsthand how life can be turned around by kindness and support. You will inspire them more than anyone else could." They worked late into the evening, finalizing plans, listing supplies, and deciding on a timeline. The young man felt a deep sense of fulfillment. For the first time, he felt that he could truly repay the debt of gratitude he had carried for so many years. It was more than just financial support or assistance. It was creating a lasting impact, offering hope and opportunity to those who needed it most.